Hello, welcome to this book review of Dungeness, a novel by Karen Polinsky. I received this book. Karen Polinsky, the author, emailed me at my work and offered me a free copy of the book, and I graciously accepted it. And a few weeks later, the book arrived in the mail, and I was pleasantly surprised upon receiving it. That was the first time an author ever sent me a free book, so I was really happy. And growing up, I grew up in Port Angeles, Squim area, so the novel had a particular interest to me in that it's a historical fiction novel. It's a story that is based off of true people with pretty true events that have been embellished to make a more compelling story. And it's about a girl named Millie who lives on the Dungeness Bay, which is where I grew up. That's actually my favorite place to go Dungeness crabbing in the whole world. And I made several hikes out to the lighthouse, which is plays like a pivotal role in this book. They talk with the lighthouse keeper. Some of the main characters participated in the massacre of some Canadian Native Americans out there in the late 1800s, and the main girl gets a gift of some silver fish earrings that came off of one of the killed native, or she actually survived. She used the earrings to pay one of the local natives to not kill her. She gave him 2 silver earrings. So the reason why I really like this book is I am from the area, and they taught me some local history that I didn't know. I knew about the massacre that took place there, and I knew about why they did it and how they did it. I didn't really know the consequences of their actions. I learned that. I learned some geographic stuff, why things were called the certain things. They mentioned like Dead Man's Point. I didn't know why it was called Dead Man's Point. That was really interesting. Right now I live in Kitsap County, and it talked about the Sklallam tribe at Port Gamble getting bombarded by the Navy because they had killed some fur traders that had stiffed them on a canoe journey. I didn't know that. I found that really interesting. I go to Port Gamble all the time. I knew there used to be a village there, but I didn't know that it got bombarded by the Navy. So that was a really cool fact. It has a lot of references to places that I would hike to when I was a kid. It talks about Moose Lake, which is one of my favorite hikes in the Olympic Peninsula. And I hike in that area, in the Squim area, a lot. So I was really able to visualize a lot of the settings that the author talks about. So that was really cool. Now, some of the things that were confusing at first, when I first started reading this book, the first couple chapters were hard to follow for me. And I kind of get that sometimes Native American storytelling, when you hear it in person, it makes a lot better sense. But it's sort of like almost, sometimes when they tell stories, it's almost like mixing like reality and a dream. And so when you hear a Native American tell you the story, it makes sense to you. But then when you read it, it's kind of hard to follow. So there, in the beginning, the first 2 chapters were kind of like this Native American storytelling tradition, like an oral tradition. They have a very strong oral tradition telling their histories. And the first 2 chapters were hard for me to follow. But then once it gets the characters established and it starts rolling, it really gets its legs. The book gets its legs, and it's really interesting and becomes quite the page turner. One other thing, and I've had this complaint with books, historical fiction books before, is it kind of like abruptly ends. And then there's just a prologue that then goes in and explains how a lot of the characters lived and tells the factual parts of the story. I always, whenever I read historical fiction, I always wish that it would cover those later years instead of like kind of glossing them over. So it covers the years when Millie is like, I think it starts out she's like, well, it starts out when she's a baby. That's like the first couple of chapters, but then like the real meat of the story is from when she's like 12 to like 18, and then it kind of cuts off, and then it explains what she did in her later life, but it's not really a narrative based. It's kind of just like factual based. So I like the book. I love reading, so I'm not the most harshest critic. I would give the book 4 out of 5 stars. Other than the beginning chapters being confusing, the book was great, and especially if you live in that area, you'll really enjoy this book. I hope, Karen, if you see this, I'm going to post this to your YouTube page. I hope you pick up some other local history books and continue to write about them. I really like historical fiction because it helps me learn historical facts about the area, which I really find interesting, but it also makes history come alive. And we have a lot of colorful characters in Washington that kind of get glossed over. And so I would like to see more books written by this author. And if you guys like historical fiction, Dungeness, a novel, good summer read, good summer pickup, and then when you're hiking in the Olympic Peninsula, you'll have some more background knowledge to some of the importance of that area, which is always nice. Whenever I go hiking, I love telling people the background about the area. All right, guys, see you next time.